At the center of the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a colossal holographic projection of the Milky Way galaxy rotated slowly. A pulse of amber light spread outward from a specific sector, Sol. As the rotation slowed, the image zoomed in, revealing the familiar blue-green sphere of Earth, its natural satellite, and the scattered stations and colonies extending through the inner system. A secondary projection overlaid the display, a single blinking notification in stark crimson letters, territory reclassified. The speaker of the session, a willowy Zalvari elder with translucent skin and elongated digits, lifted a hand in an almost ceremonial gesture. Esteemed delegates, the matter of Sol has been formally concluded. The humans, an industrious yet disorderly species, have remained unaligned with our council despite ample opportunity. Their expansion lacks foresight, their governance is erratic, and their refusal to partake in structured galactic diplomacy has led to inevitable inefficiencies. The session had already dragged through 4 planetary cycles, much to the irritation of certain factions. Before Sol had even been mentioned, the delegates had debated at length on the proposed recalibration of hyperlane taxation, the border disputes of the Velthun, and the endless bureaucratic negotiations over mining rights in the Yilkan Nebula. A delegate from the Vorus Syndicate, a serpentine being coiled atop a floating dais, hissed with mild impatience. "Let us finalize this quickly. My sector has pending trade adjustments that require immediate attention." The Zalvari speaker barely inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Yes, yes. As I said, this will not take long. The humans are a loose end, one that the Zirn are more than willing to tie off." A floating display shifted, revealing an intricate series of projections detailing humanity's erratic history. Political instability, internal conflicts, cycles of war and reconstruction. "The evidence is undeniable," a delegate from the Ilkar conglomerate declared in a smooth artificial tone. Their insectoid mandibles barely moved as their voice filtered through an artificial vocalizer. "Humanity lacks the necessary stability for self-governance. Left unchecked, they will collapse under their own inefficiencies." A murmur rippled through the assembly, some in agreement, others in idle curiosity. The speaker continued, voice lilting with the practiced patience of one accustomed to shaping the fates of lesser beings. The decision, of course, was self-evident. The humans require stewardship, not independence. Thus, by unanimous accord, the administrative control of the Sol system has been entrusted to the imperial authority of the Zirn. From one of the upper podiums, the Zirn High Executor, HFY, allowed himself a slow exhale, his secondary mandibles clicking with quiet amusement. Left to their own devices, they will tear themselves apart before they ever become relevant. We are doing them a favor. HFY allowed himself a subtle nod. His dark, ridged exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights, and his secondary mandibles twitched in what could almost be interpreted as amusement. "They should be grateful," he intoned, his voice a deep reverberation of layered vocal cords. "The Zirn Empire has guided many such species to stability. Now, most of them thrive in an environment of order and prosperity, working diligently in the mines and factories for the growth of the galactic community and this very council. I'm sure they are proud now." HFY continued his speech. "Without our guidance, humans would spiral into their usual self-inflicted chaos. Under our governance, they will have order, security, a place in a grander system than their narrow vision allows." Across the chamber, a delegate from the Cyric Dominion, a thin, avian-like being with fractal eyes, ruffled its feathered crest in mild skepticism. "The humans have never sought a place in our council. Unlike the Sashari or the Velthun, they have not attempted integration. Are we certain they will comply?" A deep chuffing sound issued from the Zirn Executor's mandibles, his species equivalent of a chuckle. "It is of no consequence. Their compliance is not required, merely their submission. There are precedents. The Veirathi, the Chikorn, even the resilient Olnex. They all accepted reality when faced with it. Humanity will be no different. Indeed, the Zalvari speaker interjected, tapping at the floating control interface before her. The holographic display shifted, highlighting key human settlements across their colonies, each now overlaid with the insignia of the Zion Imperium. The transition will be seamless. Any initial dissent will be corrected swiftly. The Zion have perfected the process. Resistance does not endure when there is no one left to resist. There will be no war, no protracted engagements, only compliance. From his seat, an Uldari delegate, his scaled visage flickering with bioluminescent patterns of skepticism, tilted his head. And the humans have been informed? The chamber fell into silence, then a low ripple of laughter. Why would they be? Jekvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Does a shepherd seek the permission of his flock before moving them to better pastures? A ripple of amusement spread through the ranks of the Zirn delegation. Zekvar's mandibles spread wide in a facsimile of a grin. It changes nothing, but in any case I will personally lead the incursion and ensure that everything proceeds smoothly. The chamber erupted in a chorus of murmurs, some of them amused, others indifferent. To most of the gathered delegates, this was simply another bureaucratic proceeding, another civilization brought into the fold of proper order. The notion that humanity might require consultation on the matter was absurd. The humans have always been an anomaly, mused the delegate from the Vorus Syndicate, her sinuous form undulating like a cresting wave. But in the end, they will fall in line, as all others have. Their defiance, if it even manifests, will be brief. The Zalvari speaker tapped her interface once more. Then it is settled, she declared. Effective immediately, the Sol system is a protectorate of the Zirn Imperium. A shimmering confirmation symbol pulsed over the holographic display, a simple formality, given that the decision had already been reached before the meeting had even begun. No announcements would be made to the humans, no envoy would be sent. The council saw no reason for such gestures. The session closed with little fanfare. Hours later, in the void beyond the council's domed halls, the sky over Sol darkened. Not with celestial drift or cosmic shadow, but with the arrival of a storm. The first wave of Zirn warships broke from hyperspace in perfect formation, their titanic hulls eclipsing entire star fields. The second wave followed moments later, then the third, and the fourth. It was not an invasion, it was the closing of a cage. The fleet moved like the slow grinding of celestial gears, steady and inexorable. Battle cruisers, bristling with weapon emplacements, took the vanguard, their hulls adorned with the crimson sigil of the Imperium. The escort vessels fanned out into strategic positions, their sleek frames absorbing the distant starlight as they formed an inescapable net around Sol. Aboard the flagship Vengeance of Droll-Kar, Fleet Marshal Javan stood at the viewing deck, arms clasped behind his back as the swirling void of hyperspace rippled beyond the reinforced viewport. And beside him, Zekvar, High Executor of the Zion Empire, observed in silence, overseeing the incursion with measured anticipation. "Hold formation," Javan ordered, voice a measured rumble. "Let the humans see us. Let them understand." Engines rumbled as formation solidified, an inevitability set in motion. They moved slowly, methodically, as Sol's gravity began to take hold, pulling them into the system they now claimed as their own. After all, humanity was not expected to resist. The first alert came from Deep Space Observatory 17, a black site station hidden within the asteroid belt. A low-priority anomaly flag, nothing unusual, given the constant interference from Jupiter's magnetosphere. Then came the second alert, this time from the long-range tracking array on Titan. Minutes later, every deep space monitoring installation across the United Earth Defense Network began transmitting the same data. Something massive had entered the Oort cloud. At Luna Command Center, Admiral Brad Waltz, stood at the center of a war room, bathed in the cold glow of holographic projections. The display before him pulsed with streams of incoming telemetry, painting a picture of an impossibility made real. A fleet. Not a single ship, not a scouting detachment, but an entire invasion force, moving as if it already owned the system. Waltz exhaled, his jaw tightening as he focused on the trajectory arcs forming on the map. 1,072 vessels detected so far, and more emerging from fold space by the minute. The ships moved with slow, methodical pace, spreading out like fingers enclosing a helpless prey. "Admiral," came a voice from the operations pit. "Lieutenant Samantha Lee, head of orbital surveillance. Confirming multiple capital-class vessels, largest fleet signature we've recorded in history. They aren't masking their approach." Waltz didn't turn. His gaze remained locked on the Sol System's strategic overview, watching as the enemy formations grew. "They're announcing themselves," he murmured. "They want us to see them." Across the room, General Frederick Stiglitz, head of UED ground forces, let out a dry chuckle. "Well, that's polite of them." Waltz glanced at him. "I assume you have thoughts." Stiglitz's face was lined from years of battle and sleepless nights. He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Yeah, I think they aren't used to resistance." Waltz nodded. That much was obvious. The Zion fleet wasn't maneuvering for combat. There was no spearhead formation, no evasive maneuvering, no flanking contingents. This was a procession, an occupation force descending like the setting of the sun, as if nothing could stop it. Waltz turned to the comms officer. "Any word from the Martian Defense Network?" "Red flag issued system-wide," the officer responded. "Colonial defense platforms are live, but they're holding their fire." "And Earth?" "Orbital batteries on standby. UEG Security Council is in an emergency session." Waltz exhaled sharply. "Of course they are. Politicians debating while the wolves circled the perimeter." He had no time for it. Stiglitz crossed his arms. "You want first contact?" Waltz nodded. "Open wideband transmission. Direct it to the fleet." The comms officer hesitated. "Sir, they aren't answering any previous hails." "They haven't been addressed properly yet," Waltz said. A moment later, the galactic standard frequency lit up. "This is Admiral Brad Waltz of the United Earth Defense, command authority of all military forces within the Sol system. Your fleet has entered sovereign space without diplomatic clearance. Identify yourselves immediately." Silence. Seconds ticked by. Waltz exchanged glances with Stiglitz. The Zion weren't ignoring them out of negligence. This was calculated. Then, the response came. A holographic feed emerged from the fleet's flagship. A towering figure materialized. A Zirn, standing tall in ceremonial battle armor, his black carapaced form glistening under the artificial light. The ridges along his exoskeleton marked him as High Executor HFY, though Waltz already recognized the arrogance even before the name registered. The alien's mandibles twitched in what could almost be amusement. "Ah," HFY began, his tone thick with amusement. "I was beginning to wonder if the primitives had lost their tongues." Behind Waltz, Stiglitz's brow twitched. No one in the room moved. HFY continued unbothered. "Humans, I am High Executor HFY of the Zion Imperium, now your rightful rulers. The decision of the Galactic Council has been made. Your territories have been reclassified. Your governance is no longer recognized. You are now subjects of the Imperium." Waltz kept his face blank. "Our what?" Stiglitz muttered under his breath. HFY's mandibles clacked. "There is no need for alarm. This is not an invasion. This is integration. You will be elevated under the stewardship of the Zion Imperium, provided you comply. Resistance is unnecessary." Waltz folded his hands behind his back. "Forgive me, High Executor. I must have missed the part where we agreed to any of this." HFY tilted his head. "Your agreement is not required. This decision was made at the highest levels of governance. You should be honored." Waltz's mouth twitched. Ah, yes. How thoughtful of the Council to distribute our home like a bargaining chip. And tell me, High Executor, were we supposed to receive a formal invitation to our own subjugation? Or were you simply going to start marching your troops through our cities and expect us to kneel? Zekvar's mandibles flared slightly. If he was offended, he masked it behind condescension. You are emotional. Predictable. Waltz smiled, a cold, thin line. No, High Executor. I am polite, and you are about to find out what happens when we stop being polite. Zekvar exhaled through his nostrils in something resembling a sigh. You are wasting time. This is not a negotiation. Your world has been annexed by decree of the Council. Waltz glanced at Stiglitz. Stiglitz rolled his shoulders and leaned forward. Well, thank you for stopping by. Unfortunately, we're going to have to decline. Zekvar's mandibles paused mid-twitch. Excuse me? Stiglitz raised an eyebrow. I said no. Waltz's voice followed, smooth and final. Earth and its colonies reject the authority of the Zern Imperium. I suggest you turn your fleet around and depart our system, and despite the politeness, this is not a request. Silence. Zekvar let out a low, amused hum. Ah, so, the apes bark. He leaned slightly forward, his mandibles curling. Then let me offer you a lesson in reality. Behind him, the Zyrn fleet began to shift. The battlecruisers repositioned, their formations tightening. Fighter wings deployed from hangar bays, spreading into strategic patterns. And the largest dreadnoughts, positioned near Europa and Mars, adjusted their weapon arrays. Waltz's eyes flicked to the tactical feed. Stiglitz frowned. They're repositioning. Waltz stepped forward, voice sharp, calm, absolute. Activate planetary defense grids. Mobilize all fleets. He turned to the fleet projections, watching as Zyrn forces locked their firing solutions onto Sol's first colonies. They think we're unarmed, he murmured. Stiglitz cracked his knuckles. They're in for a hell of a surprise. Aboard the Vengeance of Drolkar, High Executor Zekvar observed the human defiance with something bordering on amusement. The transmission had been cut off, leaving only silence on the bridge, but it did not take a scholar of warfare to interpret the meaning. They had declined. Zekvar mandibles twitched in mild interest as he turned to Fleet Marshal Javan, who stood rigid beside him. The veteran warrior's thick-plated exoskeleton bore the scars of a dozen campaigns against enemies that had mattered. His multifaceted eyes remained fixed on the holographic map of the Sol system, analyzing fleet formations and strategic points of interest. They are deluded, Zekvar said, his voice smooth, as though he were discussing an unruly pet. It is natural for a lesser species to cling to its illusions of independence, but this does not change the outcome. Javan inclined his head slightly. It does not, but their arrogance is unexpected. Zekvar made a dismissive sound. Arrogance? No. This is the reflex of a cornered animal, baring its fangs, snapping at a force it does not understand. They have convinced themselves that resistance will earn them something other than destruction. Javan's mandibles shifted in thought. They did not panic. Zekvar turned, his gaze settling on the fleet marshal. No, but it makes no difference. He gestured toward the tactical display, where Europa and Mars pulsed softly, overlaid with targeting trajectories. The humans have forgotten their place, he continued, voice cool, measured. We will remind them. Javan did not ask for casualty estimates. The numbers were irrelevant. There was only one response to a civilization that refused to accept its new reality. He turned to the command pit, where the tactical officers of the Imperial Core Fleet stood waiting for his order. Lock firing solutions, Javan commanded. Targets, Europa and Mars. A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the bridge as weapons officers executed the command. Targeting matrices shifted, calibrations refined. The warships stationed near the colonies adjusted course, their vast weapons arrays glowing as energy levels climbed. The order was not debated. There was no hesitation, a calculated lesson, a correction. Aboard the Dominion Wrath, the forward fleet's lead dreadnought, Field Commander Vekthar watched impassively as the firing sequences finalized. The humans had been offered their place. They had refused. What followed was not punishment. Punishment implied emotion, anger, retribution. This was order being restored. Across the Zion fleet, ionized plasma arrays charged, their targeting solutions locked onto the human colonies. The Mars installations, buried beneath red dust, would be the first to go, orbital cannons silenced, planetary defenses wiped clean. Europa, with its floating research hubs and subterranean ice bases, would follow. Vekthar tilted his head slightly as the fleet's primary warships synchronized their countdowns. Execute. The night sky above Mars ignited as the first salvo fell. Aboard Maro Station, one of the orbital defense platforms, an automated warning flared to life. High-energy signatures inbound. The artificial intelligence running the platform calculated the attack vectors within milliseconds, but there was no countermeasure capable of stopping what was coming. From the surface, colonists and stationed personnel watched in stunned silence as the upper atmosphere burned. The initial blasts erupted along the equatorial defense grid, obliterating sensor towers, collapsing hardened bunkers, melting reinforced alloys as though they were nothing more than wax beneath a flame. Across the planet, communications went dark. The Martian sky, so often veiled in its familiar rust-colored storms, was now a canvas of fire and ruin. Above Europa, the devastation came differently. The plasma lances did not merely strike, they pierced, slicing through the ice-crusted moon with surgical precision. Entire undersea facilities ruptured, swallowed by the oceanic abyss, the sudden thermal influx causing violent turbulence beneath the frozen expanse. From orbit, it was a spectacle of cold, merciless destruction. The human presence in both colonies had been erased. Aboard the Vengeance of Drolkar, Sekvar watched the final impact reports with mild satisfaction. The tactical display reflected the new reality. Europa and Mars, once human strongholds, were now nothing more than blackened ruins. Javan let the silence settle before he turned to face the High Executor. There will be no further defiance. Sekvar nodded slowly. They will not be so foolish again. He stepped closer to the central display, observing the human fleet still lingering in Sol's inner system. Their orbital platforms had not engaged. Their fleets had not moved. They had witnessed. And now, they would understand. "Transmit a final declaration to the humans," Sekvar said, his tone one of quiet finality. "Inform them that their world now belongs to the Imperium." Javan gave the order. A signal pulsed outward from the Zion flagship, a single transmission broadcast across all known frequencies. "This is the will of the Imperium. Your defiance has been noted and corrected. We have been generous, yet you continue to entertain delusions of sovereignty. Europa and Mars are gone. You are now subjects of the Imperium. Accept this, and your world shall be spared further suffering." The message ended. Sekvar allowed himself a moment of quiet contemplation. The humans had witnessed. Now they would submit. His gaze drifted toward the Sol system map, where subtle anomalies flickered, sensor distortions in the asteroid belt, unusual energy fluctuations along the Jovian moons. Javan took note as well. There is activity in their inner system. Sekvar let out a slow breath. A desperate scrambling. They will look for ways to negotiate, perhaps flee. Javan nodded, unconcerned. "It is meaningless." Sekvar agreed. Let them crawl. Let them beg for scraps of defiance before reality crushes them. And no one, certainly not the humans, had ever survived defying the Imperium. On Luna Command Center, about 30 minutes after the attack, the war room was silent. Not the silence of shock, not the silence of grief, but the measured quiet of calculation. Admiral Brad Waltz stood at the center of the operations hub, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the holographic battlefield suspended above the room. Around him, officers moved efficiently, each executing a role that had been prepared years in advance. The Zion believed they had shattered humanity's defenses. They were about to realize their mistake. At Waltz's side, General Frederick Stiglitz observed the burning remnants of Europa and Mars on the tactical display. His expression was unreadable, his fingers tapping idly against the holotable's surface. "They think they wiped us out," he murmured. Waltz's lips curled into a faint, knowing smirk. "They think we let them." Across the room, Lieutenant Samantha Lee monitored data streams flooding in from surviving outposts. The underground networks remained intact. The deep-sea stations beneath Europa's ice crust remained unseen. The Martian bunkers, hidden beneath kilometers of reinforced rock, were untouched. Not a single casualty. The Zion had bombed empty cities. They had melted deserted installations. They had wasted their opening salvo on ghosts. Now it was humanity's turn to strike. Waltz turned toward the operations pit. "Begin deployment." Across the void, deep beneath the frozen crust of Europa, preparations had already reached their final stage. Deep beneath the frozen crust, on Europa's subterranean command bunker, Admiral Aldo Hycox leaned forward in his chair, his cybernetic fingers drumming against the armrest as final targeting solutions flashed across his display. "All weapons online," reported Commander Julian Mercer, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Surface drones are in position." The Zern fleet hung above them, confident in its victory, oblivious to the arsenal hidden just beneath the ice. Hycox exhaled slowly. "Send the signal." The command echoed through the bunker, relayed to dozens of buried silos. Above, the still frozen landscape of Europa fractured. From the cracks, hell was unleashed. Hundreds of high-yield mass drivers erupted from beneath the ice, their barrels glowing with electromagnetic discharge as they hurled hypervelocity slugs toward the unprotected bellies of the Zion warships. In orbit, the first impacts landed. The Vengeance of Drolkar, the very flagship of the Zion incursion, took a direct hit to its ventral armor. The plating crumpled inward as molten metal burst from its core, its shield matrix unable to compensate for the sheer kinetic force. Aboard the Zion fleet, alarms screamed as ship after ship erupted into fire. The humans were alive, and they were fighting back. Far below the surface of Mars, the tremors of war were already reaching the underground fortress Arcturus. Deep within the fortress, Admiral Jack Callahan stood before a command console, watching the Zern fleet scramble to adjust. "They're slow," he muttered. "They don't even realize where the real fight is." "Yet," replied Major Jason Garcia, arms crossed. "But they will." The Zion forces had positioned themselves over what they believed to be a smoldering wasteland. They hovered over craters, over ruined cities, unaware that just below them, weapons had long been primed, waiting for this moment for years. Callahan turned to his comms officer. "Bring the grid online." Beneath the surface of Mars, a network of orbital railguns synchronized their targeting systems. The planet itself had been fortified for a war that had never come. Until now. Mars fired first. The orbital guns discharged, releasing kilometer-long streaks of energy that speared through the warships above them. The Zion screamed. Ships split apart, hull plating peeled like paper. The fleet buckled under the relentless barrage. Then, the real attack began. The Martian sky split open as human warships emerged from camouflaged positions within the asteroid belt. They had been waiting. Now, they were here to finish the job. Back to Luna Command Center, Waltz stood unmoving, his eyes locked onto the devastation playing out across the holographic display. The Zion fleet was collapsing. "Damage assessment?" Stiglitz asked. Lee's fingers flew over her console. 42% casualties among Zern capital ships. Frigates are retreating to defensive formations. They're losing cohesion. Waltz nodded. "Good." Stiglitz cracked his knuckles. "Let's end this." Waltz turned to his comms officer. "Open a channel," he ordered. Seconds later, a transmission pierced the void, directly into the remaining Zirn fleet. "This is Admiral Brad Waltz of the United Earth Defense." His voice was calm, absolute. "I hope you had your fun, High Executor, but playtime is over." Aboard the crippled vengeance of Drolkar, Zekvar reeled. His mandibles twitched, his secondary eyes flickering between data feeds that should not have been possible. They were ghosts. They were dead. And yet, his fleet was burning. "You destroyed nothing," Waltz continued. "Our people are alive. Our worlds are untouched, and your forces, they are dying." His voice turned cold as the void. "We do not ask for surrender. We do not offer peace. We are telling you, leave. Now." Silence. Then, Zekvar's mandibles clicked once in irritation. "Arrogant," he hissed. "You believe this changes anything?" Waltz smirked. "Oh, I know it does." His gaze flicked to the tactical feed. The Zirn fleet was breaking apart, their survivors retreating toward their outer system vessels. "We do not want your war," Waltz continued. "But if you bring it to us again," his voice turned into iron, "you will lose everything." The channel cut. The Zirn forces began their retreat, pulling back to regroup. The battle was not over, but the tide had shifted. Waltz turned to Stiglitz. "Get me fleet reports. I want defensive positions recalibrated. They'll be back." Stiglitz rolled his shoulders. "Yeah," he cracked a grin, "and we'll be waiting." On the Zirn's planet, the Imperial War Chamber was bathed in dim crimson light, the glow of tactical projections flickering across the towering figures of the Zirn High Command. The chamber, a vast circular construct of obsidian alloy, was silent except for the faint hum of data feeds streaming in from the Sol invasion fleet. At the head of the room, Overlord Zirvas, supreme authority of the Zirn Imperium, stood motionless, his mandibles twitching as he read the impossible reports scrolling across the holo displays. The humans had survived. They had counterattacked. They had butchered the First Fleet. Zirvas's 4 eyes narrowed, his secondary mandibles clicking against his carapace in slow, controlled agitation. This was not possible. To his left, Grand Strategist Vorkan, the chief architect of countless conquests, twitched his mandibles, his ridged exoskeleton shifting as he leaned forward. "Confirm those numbers," he ordered, his voice a low growl. The tactical overseer at the center of the room swallowed before responding. "The data is verified, strategist. The human forces have engaged with overwhelming precision. 48% of our fleet. Destroyed." A silence fell. Not a single Zirn spoke. Finally, the Overlord broke the quiet. "Connect me to High Executor Zekvar." A flicker of light pulsed in the center of the chamber, and a holographic feed snapped into existence, revealing the battered and darkened bridge of the vengeance of Drolkar. Smoke hung in the air. Emergency sirens pulsed in low, guttural warnings, and Zekvar himself stood rigid, a deep gash along his mandibles leaking dark ichor. His second eyes twitched as he recognized the transmission origin. Overlord. Zirvas leaned forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over the projection. "Explain to me how a species deemed irrelevant by the Council just tore apart my fleet." Zekvar's mandibles flexed in irritation, but there was no arrogance in his posture now. "The humans resisted," he said, voice tight, with unexpected force. A faint, chittering murmur rippled through the chamber, but no one dared interrupt. "Unexpected," Zirvas repeated, his tone slow, dangerous. Zekvar straightened, regaining a sliver of his usual demeanor. "We had no intelligence suggesting that the humans possessed this level of military infrastructure. The Council's assessment was—" "The Council's assessment?" Vorkan interrupted, his voice sharp. "Are you telling us that you allowed a lesser species to dismantle nearly half of your invasion force because you relied on the Council's assessment?" Zekvar's mandibles twitched again, his primary claws flexing involuntarily. "I did not anticipate—" "No!" You did not, Zirvus cut in, his voice dark and final. His mandibles curled inward, the Zirn equivalent of barely contained fury. Zekvar lowered his head slightly, awaiting judgment. But Zirvus did not continue berating him. His focus had already shifted elsewhere. He turned toward the war strategists stationed along the perimeter of the chamber. "This cannot go unanswered," the Overlord declared, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "The Imperium's authority has been challenged, its dominance questioned. The Zirn do not suffer defiance." Vorkan's mandibles spread in approval. "Then we eradicate them." Zirvus nodded once. "Deploy the 2nd and 3rd Imperial fleets." The command rippled outward, officers snapping to immediate action. Within seconds, the Imperial Armada was being mobilized, a force dwarfing the original invasion fleet, designed not for pacification, but for extermination. Zirvus turned back to Zekvar. "You will hold your position. Reinforcements will arrive within minutes." Zekvar's mandibles clacked together in satisfaction. "It will be done, Overlord." The transmission cut. Zirvus turned his gaze to Vorkan. "Ensure that there will be nothing left of the humans when this is finished." Vorkan's mandibles curled upward in something akin to a smile. "With pleasure." At the Galactic Council chamber, the Council's inner sanctum was quiet, save for the soft hum of floating data displays, updating in real time. The grand circular chamber, usually filled with the chatter of political maneuvering, was now reduced to watchful silence. The delegates were watching as the Zirn fleet burned, watching as a species they had dismissed stood unbroken. From his elevated position, Chairman Visath of the Zalvari Commonwealth observed the scene with measured curiosity. His pale, translucent skin pulsed faintly with subtle shifts in bioluminescence, an outward display of his calculations. "They are more resilient than expected," a delegate from the Uldari Protectorate murmured, his scaled visage flickering in soft colors of contemplation. The Cyric Dominion's envoy, a tall avian-like being, let out a sharp, clicking sound from his beak. "Resilient, yes, but the Zirn will not permit this to stand. The Imperium has sent reinforcements. The humans will be eradicated." A murmur of agreement passed through the chamber. "They overstepped," a voice speculated from the Voris Syndicate's dais, its serpentine representative coiling in satisfaction. "Now, they will be corrected." Visath's expression did not change. His gaze remained locked onto the expanding fleet signature appearing at the edge of Sol's gravity well. "The humans are irrelevant," the Zalvari elder stated simply. "The Imperium will resolve this. There is no need for the Council to intervene." Silence. Then quiet, indifferent nods of agreement. An unspoken verdict. But humanity had other plans. On the edge of the Sol system, the void of space convulsed. One by one, massive hyperspace distortions tore open the dark expanse beyond Neptune's orbit, bleeding warships into existence. Then, they arrived. The 2nd Imperial Fleet, accompanied by the 3rd Battle Armada, emerged from the turbulent folds of slipspace. Hundreds of warships, larger, heavier, deadlier than before. The leading dreadnoughts took point, their hulking frames eclipsing entire sectors of the sky, their weapons already armed. At the head of the fleet, aboard the newly arrived Dominion Wrath, Grand Strategist Vorkan stood before a massive viewport, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. Below him, the Sol system sprawled like a hunting ground, its planets aligned, its defenses waiting. He exhaled in satisfaction. The first invasion was a lesson in arrogance. This would be a lesson in obliteration. He turned to his officers. "Deploy the fleet. Total planetary assault. No quarter." Engines roared. Weapons primed. The Zirn were here, and this time, they would not stop until the Sol system was ash. At Luna Command Center, the tactical display flickered with hostile signatures, the Sol system ablaze with enemy formations. Hundreds of Zirn warships, reinforced and reorganized, surged forward like a tidal wave of destruction, their weapons primed, their intent unmistakable. Admiral Brad Waltz tracked the enemy's approach, his gaze fixed on the tactical display, analyzing their every movement. The Zern had returned, bringing with them a force that should have been overwhelming. But this time, the humans were not waiting. Across the command pit, General Frederick Stiglitz leaned forward, scanning the battlefield. "They came in angry," he muttered. "They want us gone." Waltz's eyes flicked toward the data streams. Fleet formations, supply lines, and hidden maneuvers aligned in perfect synchronization. "They're about to learn a very important lesson," he murmured. Lee called out from her surveillance console. "Zern forces have entered weapons range. Targeting systems locked." Waltz took a measured breath. "Then let's not keep them waiting." He turned to the comms officer. "All stations, engage." And the void erupted in fire. On Mars' defense grid, upper orbit, the Zyrn dreadnoughts advanced in tight formation, their hull plating bristling with weapon batteries, energy cannons, and plasma disruptors. They had learned from the first assault, closing their ranks and refining their approach. It wasn't enough. From the surface of Mars, hidden launch silos roared to life. Orbital strike cannons, previously thought disabled, discharged kinetic payloads at relativistic speeds. The first volley shattered an entire flank of enemy frigates before they could adjust. The Zyrns staggered, but the humans had more waiting. From the asteroid belt, a second fleet of warships emerged from the shadows, their hulls painted black to blend with the void. They descended upon the enemy, unleashing coordinated strikes, not random volleys, but pure, measured destruction. For the first time, the Zern hesitated. It was not just the ferocity of the counterattack. The humans were not defending. They were executing a strategy. On Zyrn flagship, Dominion Wrath, the Grand Strategist Vorkhan stood rigid at the command deck, his mandibles locked as he watched his battle projections crumble. "This isn't possible," he growled. The humans should have been on the defensive. They should have been desperate, struggling against a force they could never hope to match. Instead, they moved with sheer determination. Every counterattack, perfectly executed. Every engagement, a step ahead. He turned sharply to his second-in-command. "Where is their main fleet?" A tense pause. One of the Zern tacticians swallowed, his secondary eyes darting over the display. We are still attempting to locate them, strategist." Vorkhan's mandibles curled in irritation. "You don't lose a fleet," he snapped. "Find them!" The tactical display flickered, highlighting unexpected fleet movements. Something was wrong. The fleet's strength assessments weren't adding up. The humans were here, but only part of them. Then, a new voice came through the command channel, urgent and unsteady. "Strategist!" The signal crackled, momentarily disrupted. A few seconds later, the words came through clearly. "Sir, there's something happening back home." Far beyond Imperium space, in the void of the Zyrn home system, shadows moved unseen. Aboard a hidden warship, a human officer gave a curt nod to his crew. "Phase 1 is complete. Move to Phase 2. A fleet shifted into new positions, cutting off key trade lanes. Another detachment activated, locking onto primary supply depots. The Zyrn, for all their military dominance, had never prepared for this. For the first time in their history, the war had come to them. Across the Imperium, confusion unraveled into panic. The incoming transmissions multiplied. A command officer, his voice strained, turned toward Vorkhan. "Sir, we are detecting power fluctuations at multiple key locations in the Imperium." Vorkhan's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The officer's hands trembled slightly as he accessed new data streams. "Unknown fleet movements, disruptions to hyperspace lanes, partial loss of communications from 2 military installations in the core systems." Vorkhan's mandibles clenched. "Are we under attack?" A pause. The officer's throat clicked dryly as he scrolled through increasingly fragmented reports. "Strategist, we are losing contact with multiple command hubs. Supply stations are going dark. Trade lanes are collapsing. Vorkon felt an unfamiliar tightness settle in his core. Something was happening. Something beyond his calculations. At Luna Command Center, Waltz watched the tactical display, his face betraying nothing. The battle in Sol was ongoing, but it wasn't the real war. A voice crackled through the secure comms channel. "Admiral, Phase 2 is underway." Waltz exhaled, allowing a small nod. "Maintain position," he said. "Do not let them pass." A new fleet emerged, tightening the noose around the Zyern remnants still attempting to regroup. The enemy was realizing the truth, that they had already lost. On the Galactic Council chamber, the holographic display flickered violently, static distorting the incoming transmission. A moment later, the image stabilized. A Zyern officer appeared, his mandibles twitching, his secondary eyes darting in all directions. The red emergency lighting behind him pulsed in erratic intervals, casting jagged shadows along the walls of what should have been an impenetrable command station. "This is Fortress Drolkar." The officer's voice came through, strained, disjointed, his breathing labored. "We are under complete siege. I repeat, human forces have encircled the system. They are cutting us off from all external support." Silence fell over the Galactic Council chamber. A cold, unfamiliar silence. Seated in his elevated position, Chairman Visath of the Zalvari Commonwealth felt a slight tremor in his elongated fingers. The holo display shifted, showing real-time data streaming in from the Imperium's core systems. Blockades, supply lines severed, trade routes collapsing. "This," a delegate from the Cyric Dominion muttered, his fractal eyes narrowing as he scanned the reports. "This is not possible." Another representative, from the Uldari Protectorate, exhaled sharply. "How can the humans be there? Their forces were committed to Sol. We saw it." The Vorus Syndicate envoy, his serpentine form coiling tighter on his floating dais, hissed in irritation. "Apparently, we saw what they wanted us to see." The holographic transmission from Fortress Drolkar continued, the Zyern officer's voice trembling now. "We require immediate reinforcement. The humans—" He hesitated, looking at something off-screen, mandibles twitching erratically. "They are not engaging us directly. They are waiting. They've blocked every hyperspace corridor, every fallback point. Nothing is coming in or out." The feed glitched. A burst of static. Then, "They are taking their time." The transmission cut. Silence. Visath's skin pulsed faintly, his inner luminescence shifting to a shade of deep concern. For the first time, the Council understood. Humanity had not merely survived. They had engineered this moment. And now, the Imperium, one of the Council's oldest, most formidable powers, was dangling over the abyss. On the Imperial Fortress Command War Room, Overlord Zirvus stood motionless, his secondary eyes fixed on the holographic war map. The Xian Imperium, once an unbroken colossus, was now a fractured mass of disjointed strongholds, its central arteries choked off by an unseen enemy. His mandibles clenched hard. A pulse of static flickered across the display as a transmission connected, revealing Grand Strategist Vorkon aboard the Dominion Wrath, still engaged in the battle over Sol. His image, slightly distorted from the ongoing combat interference, stood rigid, scanning the latest reports, his mind racing through potential countermeasures. "I received the reports, Overlord. We need to break their hold on our systems," Vorkon said, his voice cutting through the transmission with forced control. "We need to consolidate our fleets and—" Zirvus slammed a clawed hand against the command console, cracking the reinforced material beneath his grip. "Break their hold?" he snarled. "On which front, strategist? The Sol fleet is trapped, our home systems are isolated, and we do not even know where their primary fleet is operating from." Vorkon's mandibles twitched, but he held his ground. "Then we must contact the Council." Zirvus turned sharply, his four eyes narrowing. "The Council allowed this to happen," he hissed. They watched. They stood by while the humans prepared. Vorkon's tone hardened. And yet, they are our only remaining leverage. A tense pause, then a deep breath from the Overlord. Open a channel with the Council. The massive hologram of Zirvas materialized in the center of the chamber, his mandibles tight with barely contained fury. "This war must end," he declared, his voice controlled but razor-sharp. "The Imperium is at risk of collapse, and the Council bears responsibility for what has transpired." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. "The humans," Zirvas continued, "have executed a systematic assault against us. They have not won a battle. They have orchestrated the dismantling of an empire. We demand that the Council intervene and force their compliance." A long pause. Then Visath finally spoke. "You are mistaken, Overlord." Zirvas's mandibles flared. "What?" Visath's bioluminescent skin pulsed in a measured, deliberate pattern. "The Council has not lost control of this situation. We merely underestimated the humans." A murmur spread across the chamber. Visath continued, careful, measured, maintaining the illusion of authority. "The Imperium is still one of our most valued powers," he said, "but the situation must be handled delicately." Zirvas seethed. "We are past delicate." Visath leaned forward slightly. "Are we?" The Council was not yet willing to admit defeat. Not yet. "We propose a diplomatic intervention," Visath said smoothly. "A resolution that preserves order while ensuring the Imperium's continued strength." Zirvas's eyes narrowed. "You are suggesting we negotiate?" A pause. Then the Zalvari chairman smiled, a slow, deliberate gesture. "With them, yes." The chamber fell into silence. No one dared to call the humans to the negotiation table. Not yet. But for the first time, it was a real possibility. Back to Luna Command Center, on a secure channel, the transmission request came through. It was not from the Imperium. It was from the Galactic Council itself. The room fell into a tense quiet as the data streams translated and decoded the message. Waltz stood at the center, arms crossed, watching as the Council's formal diplomatic request materialized on screen. Stiglitz let out a low chuckle. Took them long enough. Waltz remained silent, his expression unreadable. The Council had finally acknowledged humanity. But no one in the room reached for the controls. They simply watched. The message blipped on the screen, awaiting a response. No one moved. No one spoke. The transmission request flickered on screen, waiting. Waiting. The humans did not answer. Admiral Brad Waltz stood motionless, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the blinking message. Behind him, the command staff of the United Earth Defense observed the moment with an almost clinical detachment. The Council, the very same body that had once dismissed humanity, was now waiting on an answer they were too afraid to demand. General Frederick Stiglitz leaned in, arms folded, voice low. "You think they're sweating yet?" Waltz exhaled slowly through his nose. "They don't sweat, but they're definitely feeling it." Across the room, Lieutenant Samantha Lee monitored the incoming transmissions. The Imperium's channels had gone erratic, fractured orders, demands for reinforcements that would never come, fleet commanders desperately attempting to establish supply routes that no longer existed. The humans had not only defeated the Zern, they had rendered them helpless, and now they would decide how this ended. Waltz finally turned to the comms officer. "Open the channel." The holographic display shifted, and in an instant, the Galactic Council chamber and the Imperial Command Fortress filled the screen. The familiar figures of the Council delegates sat in tense silence, while Overlord Zirvas stood rigid at the head of the Zyrn war table. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, the humans spoke last. Waltz's voice was calm, unshaken. "It's over." Zirvas's mandibles twitched, his four eyes narrowing. "You believe you have won?" Waltz tilted his head slightly. We don't believe anything, Overlord. We know. The holographic war map updated, shifting focus from Sol system to the Zern core worlds. The Council watched as blockade routes appeared, every Zern supply chain marked with red indicators, intercepted, disabled, or obliterated. The Imperium was severed from itself. Waltz took a step forward, his voice even, unwavering. Your home system is completely surrounded. Your fleets in Sol are trapped. Your reinforcements, they are already too late, and every ship you've sent here, they are not coming back. Shirvas's mandibles tightened, but he said nothing. Waltz let the weight of his words settle before continuing. The United Earth Defense has no interest in extermination. We have no interest in conquest. But we do not forgive. He let his eyes sweep across the Council delegates, ensuring his message landed with everyone in the room. You came into our system expecting submission. You received annihilation. The Council delegates shifted uncomfortably. The tone of the meeting had changed. This was not the plea of a weaker power, nor a negotiation between equals. This was the winner dictating terms. Waltz continued, his voice turning cold as the void. You will withdraw immediately. Every fleet, every soldier, every asset. He let a short pause linger before delivering the final blow. And you will never return. Shirvas stiffened, his claws flexing at his sides. His voice was low, a whisper of humiliated rage. And if we do? Waltz's response was immediate. Then we finish what we started. Silence gripped the chamber. The meaning was clear and undeniable. The Imperium was not being spared. It was being permitted to survive. Waltz took a slow breath, exhaling through his nose before delivering the final message. You never contacted us, he said, but we're sending you this message as a courtesy. His voice lowered to ironclad finality. Go home, take care of your people, or we will do it for you. And then, the screen cut to black. The humans had spoken. The Council did not respond. Zern flagship, Vengeance of Drolkar. At the Zern flagship, Vengeance of Drolkar, High Executor. Jekvar watched as the transmission ended, his mandibles clicking in a slow, measured rhythm. Silence filled the war-torn bridge of the Vengeance of Drolkar. His fleet was crippled, his forces scattered. They had lost. Commander Vekthar, his second-in-command, stood beside him, his voice low. Orders, High Executor. Jekvar did not answer immediately. His gaze remained locked on the dim tactical displays, where the red warning signals of the Imperium's blockades blinked like silent death markers. He had led the greatest fleet the Imperium had ever assembled, and now it was broken. His claws curled against the edge of the console. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. We retreat. Vekthar exhaled sharply, his shoulders dropping slightly. Understood, sir. One by one, the remaining warships blinked out of the system of the Luna Base Command Center, their fold space drives engaged, their shattered forces limping home. Stiglitz leaned back against the console, watching as the final enemy ship disappeared from the tactical display. Well, he exhaled. That was satisfying. Across the room, officers broke into quiet celebration, not of joy, but of relief. No cheers, no shouts. Just exhaustion settling in after a battle that had stretched humanity to the edge. Stiglitz turned to Waltz, raising an eyebrow. So, you ever really plan on taking care of their people for them? Waltz smirked, shaking his head slightly. No. Stiglitz snorted. Yeah, didn't think so. Waltz rolled his shoulders, stretching the tension from his neck. But it sounded good, didn't it? Stiglitz chuckled, running a hand through his graying hair. Damn right it did. Across the command center, Lee called out from her station. Sir, we're receiving observation requests from Council member states. They want an update on Zern withdrawal confirmation. Waltz exhaled, rubbing his temples. Let them wait. Lee smirked. Already done, sir. The humans had not asked for recognition. They had not asked to be acknowledged. But after this day, no one in the galaxy would ever dare ignore them again. Hey there again. I'm glad you've come so far. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. This is really important to the channel. Really important. And I have one more thing for you. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.